So we've got some people on here right now. There we go. I think the audio is on. Just to help me do an audio check real quick, if somebody in the chat section can just tell me if you can hear me or not. Pretty much if you answer, I'll be able to tell. Awesome. Thanks, Adam. Appreciate it. Sounds like we're good. Thanks, Merrick. Of course, we got 10 more minutes, so we're just gonna hang out for 10 more minutes, and then we'll get this thing started. I'm gonna go ahead and mute this real quick and turn off the screen. I'll be back in about 5 minutes. We are recording. It's a miracle I remembered to do that. And we're going to get started here. Let's make sure that we can see my screen here. Hold on one second. All right, so you guys should be able to see my screen now. Let me know if you can see my screen. Darn it, I thought that we might just have to do the presentation from this view right here because it's not going into, it's not working with presenter view. All right. All right, can somebody tell me whether or not you see the, all right, awesome. You guys see it. So let's get this started. I'm gonna go ahead and turn off the comments just for now. You guys can still comment and I'll be able to see it. But hold on one second. No, I can't see it. Technical difficulties. Oh, there we go. I figured it out. All right. So this webinar that you guys have signed up for, and I really appreciate you guys showing up tonight. Thank you and happy weekend. It's awesome that it's the weekend, and hopefully you guys got some fishing in today. I went out on Lake Chickamauga today, had a good time. Still real cold as we just discussed. So my name is Miles Burghoff, also known as Sonar. A lot of people call me Sonar in the fishing world. And this webinar is called A Finesse Revolution, Fishing the Ned Rig, okay? And it is presented by Navionics, and it's also presented by Z-Man Fishing, kind of the godfather, you know, the company that really started it all as far as the Ned Rig goes. They didn't start it, but they revolutionized it. And so we're going to get into that. A little bit about myself. I'm a Bass Master open angler. Okay. I'm fishing Lake Kissimmee coming up here, fishing all the Easterns. So I fish those. I fish a lot of different events. A lot of BFLs and things like that. Anything that comes my way. I'm just a tournament addict. And I'm also the co-host of Sweetwater TV, which is a television show on NBC Sports, Sportsman's Channel, and also on Fox Sun Sports if you're down in Florida. And then if you want to watch it anytime, any device, you can go to waypointtv.com. That's a online streaming app that you can get on your Roku, Apple TV, Smart TV, PlayStation, whatever it is. You can watch hunting and fishing shows, including ours. So that's a really good one. You guys got to check that out. It's pretty much binge worthy 365 days a year. So I'm also a guide on Lake Chickamauga, and I also guide in Alaska, where I don't really fish the Ned Rig, but I'm sure that I could catch a bunch of fish there. So today's presentation, before we really get into the meat of it, I want to say, first off, I'm going to be keeping up with the Q&A as much as possible on here. And, you know, a lot of people, presenters, you know, in seminars and webinars, they like to wait till the end to answer questions. And I like to kind of do a hybrid. I think that answering questions that are pertinent to the information that we're talking about at the moment, it allows for much more information to come out. And so I like that. So if you have a question that pertains to what we are talking about at the moment, then you know, by all means, please ask it, because I really like to answer those questions. So don't be shy. And we're also going to be giving away a couple prize packs. We're going to be doing some Ned Rig variety packs from Z-Man. So I'm going to do those. I haven't really, I think I know how I'm going to do those. We're just going to do kind of a random number guess. And we're just going to pepper that in throughout this. So I'm going to write down a number between so-and-so, and then you pick the number, and then that's going to correspond with somebody on this deal. So. All right. And if it ever goes quiet like this, it's just because I am looking through the questions and stuff like that. So, all right, let's get started. Let's get all this stuff out of the way. All right, the Ned Rig is what we're talking about tonight. You guys know that the Ned Rig has been extremely popular as of the last couple of years. It's something that everybody's talking about, and it's really something that a lot of people tend to say, we've been doing this for forever. You know, this is nothing new. This is just essentially a small little jig head presentation, you know, just small straight tail worm. What's new about that? And a mushroom style head. Yes, there's nothing new about these components, but together, really, this kind of presentation, this small diminutive presentation, really hasn't been very popular and hasn't really been something that people have been talking about for very long. So that's what the Ned Rig is just a very small, a compact presentation. So we're going to talk about the definition, get a little bit more into that. We're going to talk about the Ned Rig as a system. And that's exactly what the Ned Rig is. There's a lot of different components to this system, and choosing the right components for different situations is key with this bait. Okay, fishing the Ned Rig, why, where, when, and how. We're going to be getting into that, and then we're going to talk a little bit about thinking outside the box. And again, I want everybody to join in, ask me questions. We got a Q&A right here. So Robin asked, what would be the best size and weight to buy to start out with? Let's get into that in just a little bit. I got a really good answer for you. So we're gonna do that. That's a tough question, but we're gonna answer that. All right, so we'll leave that there. So what is the Ned Rig? We just discussed it a little bit. I kind of went off the beaten path there. But the Ned Rig is this right here. Okay, it's a very small, soft plastic presentation with a small jig head. Okay, and Ned Rig, by definition, needs to have a mushroom head on it. Okay, a lot of people use a lot of different style heads, but this mushroom head is really what makes it the most effective, paired with this small bait. And the reason that Z-Man has made it real popular over the last couple of years is because their Elastec is really key in this tactic, because it has, you know, if you've used Elastec before, you know that it's very durable. It's not stretchy, isn't necessarily something that it makes it a great a bait, but it's extremely durable and it's buoyant. So when this thing sits on the bottom, every time you move this bait, it sits on the bottom absolutely perfectly straight, up and down, because it's very buoyant, and you've got that flat bottom mushroom head jig head. Okay, so the Ned Rig is named after Midwestern finesse guru Ned Rig. I think I'm pronouncing his name right. Seems like a super nice dude. I'm on his email list. The guy knows everything there is to know about finesse fishing. He's pretty amazing. And it's popularized by Z-Man. Again, it's because Z-Man really has the right material to make this bait very, very effective. And so that's why it's been so popular. And the reason is for the Elastec and them making the right components. And don't feel bad if I don't answer your questions right away. I'm just waiting for the right moment for each one. All right, so the bait, like we just discussed, consists of an ultra small bait, 2 to 3 inches generally, and a small light wire mushroom style jig head, primarily classified as a ultra finesse technique. However, we're going to get into a lot of different uses for it. It's not just 4-pound test or 6-pound test line and ultra light rods. This is something that you can do and beef up your tackle and adjust to situations and really capitalize on catching fish that wouldn't eat a bigger presentation, a gaudier presentation. And so this bait, okay, this presentation, the Ned Rig, has really turned me back on to finesse style fishing. Okay, I really started to define my fishing as more power fishing. That's something I love to do, through chatterbaits, top waters, flipping, pitching, things like that. And I'm using real heavy line generally. However, when you are a power fisherman, a lot of times you really have to have something in your back pocket that can allow you to catch fish under tough conditions. And this bait right here, when I first saw it, when we first partnered with Z-Man several years ago, when we started Sweetwater, I got these TRDs in the mail. The little turd looking thing didn't look like much to me. It was just a straight tail little worm, and I'm just like, okay, whatever, looks good. I'm sure it catches fish. It's not going to be on my rod during a tournament. However, we found ourselves in a situation in some super clear water down in Florida on the Rainbow River, which is extremely tough at times. And that's when I picked this thing up. I said, oh man, I kind of see how this can work. Let's see if it does. And sure enough, it did. And from there, it just caught like wildfire. And I've been altering the presentation to fit different conditions ever since. So, all right, let's see. We got a question. All right, so I've got some questions here, and they're going to be good for the next couple sections here. All right, so let's start off with the components of the Ned Rig. The Ned Rig, of course, real simple: jig head, soft plastic. That's the basic rig. There's several different jig heads, and I'm not just listing these because they're Z-Man products. Z-Man really is at the forefront of this Ned Rig revolution because they've made a lot of money off of it. They've done a great job with it, and so they designed the products that work the best. Period. So the main jig head that is the first one that came out is the Finesse Shrooms jig head. Okay, very, very light wire. It's got this little welded on bait keeper here. You've got the flat bottomed mushroom head. Very, very well built little jig, and that's the old standby. And then you start getting into some more heavy wire jig heads that they have. They've got the Power Finesse jig head. Okay, that's the one that's kind of chartreuse here. That much bigger. I don't have one on the table here. It's a bigger hook, beefier hook, and it's a longer shank, so it's designed for larger baits. And then you've got the Nedlocks HD, which is just came out, I think, at ICAST, which is this one right here. very, very similar. However, it has a heavier hook, okay, heavier gauge hook, and then it has this lead keeper on the shank that's a little bit different than the welded keeper, which works extremely well with the Laztec. And so it's essentially the same size as the finesse shrooms with the light wire hook. It's just everything's beefed up so you can use heavier line. You can fish it in a little bit heavier cover and for bigger fish. And then of course you get into the weedless versions. Okay, so there's other options for it. And you've got the original weedless finesse shrooms jig head. Okay, that's this one right here. It looks like there's one weed guard there, but that's actually two weed guards. Okay, and the first little tip I'm going to give you is to take those two weed guards that come in the package as one and split them to make a V, and that's going to protect your hook on both sides. So if it rolls, you're not gonna snag it. It does an extremely good job at keeping weedless, and so that one's really good for weedless presentations. And then of course we have the Shrooms Micro Finesse Jig, which is right here. It's like a standard jig. However, it's still very toned down, smaller. It's got the weed guards on it. It's got a slightly stronger hook. And it just gives it a different presentation. It's like throwing a tiny ultra mini jig. So works really good. All right. And all of these come in a variety of different sizes, all the way from 1/20th all the way up to like 1/5. Okay. They've got weird, incremental weights. Okay. But I would say, let's actually go onto the Z-Man store here. All right. And I just so happen to be on the Finesse Shrooms page. All right. So we've got a question from Robin. What would be the best size in weight to buy to start out with? Now, I'm a big believer in always having different size weights for different depth zones, different desired fall rates of fall and things of that sort. But I'll tell you what, the 1/10 size, which is kind of the middle of the road size, has a good solid fall. You know, it falls fairly quick, so you can fish, you know, shallow water and deeper water. It's a good middle of the road weight. That's the one I would recommend if you're going to just choose one. The 1/10, maybe, you know, the 1/15, but that's when you're starting to get a little bit too light, in my opinion, for all conditions. In shallow, that's definitely not too light. All right, let me just check the chat real quick. Yeah, Brian, he says he likes the 1/15 and the 1/10. 1/10 is definitely my favorite. All right, so let's get back to the presentation here. Oh, don't do that. All right, and then we've got another question that's relevant to the topic right now, and that is from Mario. For fishing in 30 to 40 foot deep, what size head would I use? Okay, so if we're talking about the Finesse Shrooms jig head, the traditional one, light wire, something around, I want something that gets down there really quick. Okay, I want something that just dives down to the bottom. I want good solid bottom contact. I want to get down to the bottom quick. So for 30 to 40 feet, that's pretty deep. So I wouldn't go any lighter than 1/15 ounce, or sorry, excuse me, a 1/6 ounce or 1/10 ounce. But a 1/5 of an ounce, which is the heaviest one they have, is a pretty good size for fishing that deep. And Matt concurs. He says he uses his, you know, a 1/5, 1/6, and 20 plus. You know, I like that heavier bait, you know, heavier weight to get down there really, really fast and maintain bottom contact. All right, and we've also got another question as far as the weight and the hook. And it's from Kim, primarily in clear water. How about stained water? All right, so I'm gonna kind of take this question and turn it into, you know, what the subject is right now. The deeper the water, the heavier the weight. The clearer the water, the heavier the weight. I want something in clear water, the clearest water, to get those fish to react on the fall. One of the things that this bait does extremely well is it falls, has this nice glide that really it really is very similar to a tube. Okay, it has a nice kind of subtle glide to it, and with that heavier weight, you get a really good reaction bite out of those fish in the clear water. But in murkier water, I want something a little bit lighter. Okay, so in deep water, clear water, you want something fast falling. In shallower water, murkier water, something a little bit lighter that kind of has a more subtle fall, and it's not going to dig into the muck very much. All right, let's see what we got on questions here. All right, so that kind of does it for the jig head. So let's move on to the soft plastics themselves. Again, I'm just mentioning Z-Man baits here, not just because you know, I work with Z-Man, but because I absolutely just 100% believe that they're the best for a Ned rig, because they have the buoyancy, they're extremely strong, they're very soft, they've got a lot of action. I'm going to clean up some of this real quick. All right, so you can use pretty much with this tactic, you can pretty much use any soft plastic. I'm not saying that you're not going to catch fish with other soft plastics or traditional soft plastic material. However, a Lastec, again, like I said, is durable, it's soft, and it's very buoyant. The Finesse TRD is by far my favorite out of all of them. That's the one that I started out with. That's the one that you know, really turned me on to the Ned rig, and it's still my favorite by far. If I'm turning to the Ned rig, the first thing that I'm turning to is the TRD. And the reason for that is because the fish just, there's nothing to hate or be scared about by this presentation. It's so tiny. It's so easy to love. These fish just gobble it up. They have no fear of it, which is very, very important with you know, the highly pressured lakes that we're presented with nowadays. And that's why the Ned rig is so effective. And so I want something that's real subtle, real simple. It has that traditional stick bait design to it. Really good bait. But you have a lot of different options. And I'm not saying that the TRD is the best for all situations. That's just my favorite. You've got the TRD Hogs, which is this one right here. It's the one with some appendages on it. It's got, you know, it's really much different. You know, if you're presented with a situation where they want crawfish specifically, or you're bed fishing with this bait, which is a big secret. We'll talk about that a little bit. And you know, it's just a different presentation. Then of course, you know, you've got the big TRD, which is this one right here. It's a much bigger presentation. It's really closer once you rig that bait up. It's closer to a traditional shaky head than anything, but it still sticks straight up in the air or in the water column when you fish it. And that one works really, really well in some instances that you want a bigger profile bait. I use that one quite a bit, but it's a little bit different. It's not really the Ned rig to me when it gets to that size. And then of course you got some like the TRD tubes and the hula sticks and those baits. So these are all really good. The TRD tubes, which is this one right here, that one's pretty cool. That one's actually the smallest in the lineup. It's got a lot of action to it, and that one's an overall great bait. And I just noticed something. I didn't really mention any of the color schemes that you can do, but another great thing about the Ned rig is that they have all different colors for the jig head, so you can mix and match I generally stick with the green pumpkin or the black because I'm a traditional, green pumpkin is my favorite color. That's the color that I use the majority of the time. However, if I'm fishing for spots or smallmouth, chartreuse is great, red's great. Or if I'm bed fishing, maybe chartreuse or white, really good options there. All right. We are blowing up on the questions here, so I'm going to just take a second, read some of them. Okay, so here's a really good question. How do you store the Z-Man plastics? Okay, Z-Man is known for their Elastec. Again, has really good qualities, but one quality that it does have is that it cannot mix with other soft plastic baits. You cannot take it out, put it in a box with other soft plastics. So I keep them in the bag. Okay, I keep them in the bag, and Z-Man actually makes something called bait binders. And so it essentially keeps all of those bags with the Elastec, and there's little holes in the bottom of the new packages, and it keeps them in the original package in that bait binder. It keeps them organized. I keep all my soft plastics or my Elastec plastics in those containers. So, or Ziplocs, just put them in gallon Ziplocs. All right. All right. So we have a question from Matt here. He says, I catch a ton of 1 to 2.5 pound fish on TRDs. And how can I bump up my average size? The throwaway answer to this is to upgrade your the size of your bait here. You've got the big TRD. That's the one you can kind of go to in case you want to increase the size of the fish you're catching. However, that being said, that's not entirely true. I've caught a lot of fish, big fish. I've caught up to 7.5 pounders on the Ned Rig with the TRD. So really, it just comes down to finding the area where those bigger fish are, and where they're not surrounded by little fish, because you're going to be weeding through a bunch of little fish with the Ned Rig if you have to weed through those guys to get to the bigger ones. But one thing that we're going to talk about is actually a really good way to catch bigger fish too. So I'm going to clean up a little bit of this. And I've got a question from Kyle. Have I ever tried the Z-Man paddlers on a Ned Rig? I haven't tried it. I'm sure it works. I've done, the Damiki rig has been something that's really, really popular nowadays too. Real popular. One of the first events on the Elite Series last year was dominated by it. And the Ned Rig head works really, really well for those presentations too. There's little swim baits and little shad presentations that Z-Man makes, and those jig heads work really, really well for that. I'm asked by Jim, do you add scent? I don't add scent. These are salt impregnated. They've got plenty of salt in them. Really, it's not something I do. If you have another reason that I add scent is so fish hold on to it better, so I get better hook sets. But this thing's so small and the hook's so sharp and tiny, I get a good hook set and I don't lose a lot of fish. So I really haven't experimented with a lot of scent. So, all right. So those are the different baits that we've got. All right, and so. There's a lot of different options. You can do just about anything. Something that a lot of people do, and this is kind of how this presentation started, is by people, cutting, little stick baits, Senkos and stick baits in half or even smaller, and then putting them on these little jig heads, and that does work. However, again, the qualities that the Elastec has is really the key here. Okay, let's move on here. All right, so continuing with the system, the Ned Rig system, let's talk about the rod that I use. This is a light line presentation, so I'm using spinning gear 100% of the time. Never use bait casting gear with this setup. You can. If you could put 4-pound test on or a 6-pound test on a bait casting rod, and you want to do that, that's great. But I use a Fitzgerald rod, 6/8 medium heavy spinning rod. And now medium heavy is not necessarily the where I want you to focus on this, because generally the rods that I use for the Ned Rig have a very soft tip. Okay, they've got a lot of flex, very, very light tip, and for some reason that 6/8 Fitzgerald Versa series has a very, very light tip. I was actually really surprised with it because it said medium heavy. I figured it would be too stiff. I'd bend that hook out. I just didn't think that would be the right rod. So, but then I picked it up and started using it, and it works extremely well. So that it has a very, very light tip, but it's got enough backbone if I'm fishing the heavier hooks around heavier cover, or I'm fishing for bigger fish. I still have the option of really turning those fish around, getting them away from that cover, and being more effective with that. But it does a really good job. Outside of that, if you're looking for another brand, you want to look for a rod that's generally medium, and maybe even down to medium light. If you're fishing around just rock and very, very light cover, medium light is really good. The key is making sure that it's a very light setup and that you're not bending out that hook on a big fish. The reel that I use is a Quantum Vapor size 30. Any size 30 or 3000, whatever category they have that reel in, that's going to work great. And what I do is I like to spool up between 4 to 10 pound test, fluorocarbon, straight fluorocarbon, vicious is what I use. Or majority of the time, I'm using 20-pound vicious braid with like a 25-foot a fluorocarbon leader, like 8-pound test. And that does several things for me. Number one, it increases sensitivity. It allows me to make longer casts. It reduces the memory. And it just really gives me a lot of sensitivity when it's in deeper water, and it allows me to really corral those fish and turn them and do the things that I need to do. The one thing that you want to remember though is that you cannot boat flip fish on the Ned Rig. Okay, you can't, especially when you're using the Finesse Shrooms jig head, the original with the lightest wire hook. You do not want to boat flip these fish, even tiny fish. I mean it. Just the weight of a tiny fish can start bending out that hook and weakening it. So always just either lip your fish or net them, and don't boat flip them. So that's real key. Yeah, and again, Ron points out here, braid to Florido, it means that there's not going to be any line twists too. Okay, yeah, over time your leader can get a little bit twisted, but that's not going to really do anything. Kevin asks, what knot do I use for going from braid to fluorocarbon? If you're really worried about the size of the knot, the Alberto knot is a really good knot to use. The Alberto knot is fairly easy to tie, but it makes a very compact, narrow knot. Okay, if you're tying from braid to fluorocarbon. But the old standby, probably the strongest connection that you can have from braid to fluorocarbon, probably easiest to tie for me, because I have a lot of history with it, is the uni to uni knot. Uni to uni knot is a really good option pretty much all the time. But the drawback is it's a bigger knot. Sometimes it'll go through your guides kind of weird. So if I start having problems, if I have micro guides or something like that, which I generally don't use, I may switch over to the Alberto. But I have so much confidence in the uni knot, so that's the one I use. And we're going to be getting into the different retrieves and all that in just a little bit. One of the comments here that's pertinent to this is when you're setting the hook, absolutely make sure you have a sweeping hook set. You're essentially reeling down. If you fish a drop shot a lot, it's a very similar hook set. You're essentially reeling down until the full pressure of the fish is in the reel, and then you just kind of lift up. But you never, snap hook set. That's going to cause problems. You're probably going to break off and possibly damage the hook. Man, we're getting a lot of questions. I love it. It is a little bit overwhelming, but we're going to get through it. All right, so we're going to clean up some of these. And congrats on that big fish on New Money. That's a good color. All right, so let's continue here. Ned Rig, versatility in a small package. All right, so the Ned Rig is known as a finesse tactic, light line finesse tactic, and that's going to remain true. However, you can really do a lot more with this the Ned Rig, and that's kind of the reason why I've really used it so much, is because you can use it in a lot of different situations. You can alter it. You've got a lot of different components that can really make an effective package in any condition. You can use different line sizes depending on the hook that you're using. With the new Ned locks, you can really beef up that line and get up to, say 12-pound test. It's a lot. That's a pretty heavy line for the Ned Rig, but you can beef things up. It excels in a wide range of conditions and cover options, believe it or not. I'm not fishing this in extremely heavy cover, but I'm fishing around a lot of different types of cover. Again, you can easily adjust components to the conditions. Catches fish during all seasons. Okay, so I can't tell you. I've already got questions on the board asking what is the best season to fish this bait. There is not a best season to fish the Ned Rig. The Ned Rig excels when it's tough. So that's all I can say, is that if it's tough and those fish want something that's a little bit smaller, the Ned Rig is your go-to. But I'm catching fish on it right now. I'll catch fish in the spring, summer, fall. I'd probably say the spring and the fall are my favorite times to fish the Ned Rig, but that's probably because they're my favorite times to fish. It's effective in virtually any type of lake. Again, when I first started using the Ned Rig, I was fishing down in Florida, casting this bait underneath docks, on the outside edges of grass. And then I took it to California and fished for spotted bass and largemouth in lakes like Oroville or Shasta. And those are deep, clear, rocky lakes, and did a ton of damage. Absolutely just killed the fish down over in California doing that. And then I fished Clear Lake and started bed fishing. So, and I caught some big fish doing that. So there's a lot of different lakes that this can be really effective in. And it can be used in all depth zones. That's why it's so versatile, is because you can use it in different depth zones, all the way, pretty much any depth zone you want. Once you start getting past 40 feet, that starts becoming pretty tough zone to fish unless it's a very, very calm day. And it's not just a small bass bait. I'll say that. You're going to catch a ton of small fish with this, but it's one of the best at catching limits and also catching larger than a lake's average size if that lake is extremely tough fishing. Okay. Let's clean this up a little bit. Kim, I have not used the FG knot, but all right. And I've got a question. I actually, I'm going to wait till the end for some of these. All right. The questions there's quite a few, so I'm just going to keep on rolling. Fishing the Ned Rig. Why would you fish the Ned Rig? Number one, the reason the Ned Rig, you're hearing so much about it, and the reason we're talking about it tonight is because this bait has an ultra small profile. I firmly believe that fish are just so highly pressured nowadays. There's so many fishermen out there, and we have such great tactics and gear that every fish is being caught, and they're being caught often. So we needed a bait like this, a very small, compact bait that the fish aren't going to be scared by. They're not worried about this bait. If this bait gets cast to them, it's not something that they're going to be fretting about and taking off. That's why on the Rainbow River, when I first picked this bait up, I was casting everything out at them because it's super clear water down there. They can see you from a mile away, and they can see your bait. I would cast a wacky rig, which is a finesse tactic if I've ever seen one, way ahead of a bass, and they just take off. But with the Ned Rig, it was so small that they had no problem picking it up. Excuse me. So it's an ultra small profile. That's why these fish like it. Their opportunity cost is very small. They don't have to worry about eating that bait because it's just diminutive and something that they don't have to worry about. They're not scared of that. Elastec is the key. Okay, we've talked about that before. The glide is another reason to use the Ned Rig. It has that subtle horizontal glide to it that really kind of spirals down if it's rigged correctly, and it needs to be rigged perfectly straight like this. It needs to be perfect like that to have the great fall. But the glide is something that's also really good. Fish have no fear of it. It's something different. They don't see a lot of presentations this small. And it's an excellent limit catcher, but has big fish potential. But it's all relative. You're not going to go out there on a regular basis and catch the biggest fish in your lake with the Ned Rig, okay? But if you live on a lake that has very, very small fish on average, like 3-pounder is a big fish, dude, you're going to dominate with the Ned Rig. I mean it. If you live on a lake or fish a lake that has small fish average, the Ned Rig's perfect, and you'll catch bigger fish with it. Okay. Fishing the Ned Rig where? Okay, we've already talked about it. Water clarity is key. With this tactic, it doesn't have any rattles. It doesn't have very much sound, except for when it's hopping on the rocks, ticking the rocks. It doesn't put off a lot of vibration because of its small size. So a clear to moderately stained water is very, very important for this tactic. It's not very effective in extremely muddy water, but I do use it in stained water. If I could see it go down, a foot, that's good enough for me. But I'm fishing very, very shallow, and I'm fishing closer to the cover in those dirtier water situations. The one thing that the Ned Rig excels around, obviously it goes without saying, because of the light tactics that you're using and the light wire hook, that it's really a sparse cover presentation. However, it does excel around certain types of cover. Okay, rock and sparse hard cover are really key. Structure like rocky points, bluff banks, humps, those type of things. That's where the Ned Rig really works well. Docks, piers, pilings, anything that's vertical. Anytime you've got vertical cover, the Ned Rig works really well because it has that nice subtle glide that goes down the entire length of that, whatever that cover structure is. Beds, okay, this is something not a lot of people do, but I love bed fishing with the Ned Rig. One of the biggest problems with fishing for fish on the beds is that they're very cautious. Okay, they've seen all different types of bait. Even though they're still probably going to eat a larger bait that they've seen all the time, they're going to be scared of it, and they're going to be nipping the tail. They're just going to be nipping at it and moving it off the bed. But with the Ned Rig, it's so small, number one, that it would take a lot of concentration to just nip the tail and not get the hook. And it's so small that they're just not scared of it. So I put that baby on the beds, And generally I'll beef it up. I'll put maybe the Ned Locks HD on there, and beef up my line to like 12-pound test to be able to force those fish out of that cover a little bit better. Excuse me. I don't wish this flu on anybody. It's been pretty tough. Probably majority of you already got it. But yeah, bed fishing. This is a big time bed fishing bait. I've caught up to 7.5 pounders. Like I said, my biggest was on Clear Lake in California. Threw everything I had in the boat at this fish before I threw the Ned Rig, and it immediately picked it up. It's not scared of it. But what I do is I use the higher visibility heads and maybe a higher visibility bait on there. But I still use the Ned Rig. I may even take the TRD and cut a 1/2 inch off of it, make it even smaller. Okay. Ledges. Savage said that he wore them out on Kentucky Lake on the ledges. Yes, absolutely. You'll be able to catch them any place that has sparse cover. It's just throw it. If there's fish around, throw it. Lay downs, brush, standing timber, and stumps. This is something that I like to do a lot. Okay, this is not just a steep structure, rocky bank type presentation. I actually fish a lot of lay downs, brush, standing timber, and weed lines with the Ned Rig. And I'm going to give you a little tip right now that probably not a lot of you guys do. And I don't talk about it a whole lot because it's actually a way of rigging it that not a lot of people do. I do use the weedless hooks that Z-Man makes. However, the majority of the time, if I'm fishing a tournament or I'm fishing around heavier cover, this is a way that I hook them much, much better. And I feel like it has a better action. I'm essentially going to Texas rig this bait. Okay, it's going to look stupid. It's going to look like you have absolutely no chance at hooking that fish effectively and getting it in the boat because there's not going to be any gap in the hook left. So we're going to essentially just take it, go down like I'd say maybe 1/4 inch or less. Okay, bring it, pull that bait up to the head, and I always use super glue. Okay, that's one of the questions. Always super glue the head to the bait, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and just shove the hook point into the bait. That is exactly how it needs to look. It's a little bit kinked. It doesn't look like it falls right. But that bait right there, rigged like a Texas rig, is unbelievable. Okay. And even though there's not that big of a gap, you don't want to even get the hook point close to the other side of the plastic. Just keep it like that. The great thing is that Elastec is so soft that it compresses completely. And when you set the hook, you just that reeling hook set and pull them back, you're going to hook them every single time. I actually have a amazing hooking percentage with this, even better than the weedless versions of the jig heads, even though I love the weedless version of the jig heads. Don't get me wrong. But if I'm fishing around cover, I fish it like that. And and the first time that I started doing that was on Lake Orville. And if anybody knows Lake Orville, they know that it is a spotted bass fishery. There's largemouth there, but when you go fish a tournament there, 95%, if not more, of the fish caught in the tournament are going to be spots. And to have a limit full of largemouth is like almost unheard of. Very few people have done it. And I actually started Texas rigging this bait and throwing it around laydowns for pre-spawn fish leading into the backs of these creeks, and just slowly bringing it over the branches, just kind of walking it down those laydowns on those 45-degree banks. And I caught 3 limits worth of largemouth doing that, and got a nice fat check. So that's if you take anything from this, fish it like that. I mean it. It's going to work real good. All right, I just gave away one of my bigger secrets, and I fish that around pretty much any type of cover, but outside of the cover. even in the laydowns, situation, there wasn't very many branches, and I was casting to the outside and just slowly working my way down. And in weed lines, I want to make sure that the fish are coming out of the grass to eat the bait. And so it's a great tactic for when you're fishing a weed line and those fish have enough visibility that they can dart out and grab something before they go back in. But anytime I'm presented with very sparse, isolated cover, like a little stick up here, little patch of lily pads or reeds over here, that's where I'm going to throw that thing. And I like to fish it between 0 and 20 feet. All right, let's keep on moving. Where, again, docks are a great place to fish the Ned Rig. Use lighter jig heads for skipping. The lighter the jig head that you use, the better it's going to skip. But you're also going to lose that weight and that casting distance. So I use something probably the 1/15 ounce size, the most for skipping. And as far as the laydowns, the Texas rig, use that. It's great for spring. That's when you're casting to the sparse cover in the backs of those pockets or leading into the backs of those pockets. It's great to use the Ned Rig in that situation. It's best worked outside of that thickest cover again. And beds. The fish don't spook easy with that. With the Ned Rig, the hooking percentage is high. What else do you want? Because unless that thing is bedding inside of a bunch of lily pads or in the nastiest cover, the Ned Rig's just going to catch them pretty much every time. All right. When to fish the Ned Rig? It's a year-round technique. Like I said before, it's not a technique that is pigeonholed into 1 or 2 different, seasons, because it's so versatile and you can fish it from 0 feet all the way down to whatever depth you're patient enough to fish. You can pretty much fish at any time of the year. High pressure situations and tough fishing conditions. This is where it excels. It's the reason why the Ned Rig is so good. Clear water, low wind and sunny days, high fishing pressure. When large baits are being heavily used, if you're on a lake that is predominantly known for big baits and the fishing's real tough, that's when you pick up the Ned Rig and start mopping up behind people. Great technique for great segue too. I forgot that I had that as the next second, but yeah, it's great mop-up bait. Great for filling out limits with keepers, and it's an excellent choice, like I've said before, for small fish fisheries. Okay, spotted bass lakes and with lakes with smaller than average size fish, this is going to pump up the average size for you because it's such a small, out of the norm presentation. Excuse me, man. Brutal. Fishing the Ned Rig. How? All right. So now all those questions everybody's asking about how to fish it. There's a lot of different ways you can fish it. Okay. The very first one that I want to talk about is what I call spot casting, which is essentially if you're going down the bank, you're fishing just isolated pieces of cover, say a stick up right over there, just one branch coming up. I'm going to cast the Ned Rig right outside of that branch and fish it there. And then after I've worked it maybe a foot from that cover, I'm going to cast to the next piece of cover. And that's what I call spot casting from one spot to another, not working it all the way back to the boat. I'm getting the majority of the bites on the initial fall, and I'm just making small hops away from that piece of cover until I want to reel it back in and make another cast. Next cover or a way to fish it is just shaking it like a shaky head. Okay, because it's so light and so small, it's going to move a little bit more than a shaky head. It's just going to kind of hop up like this. That's a puppet master. And you're just going to cast it out there, let it fall down kind of semi-slack line. Again, a lot of the bites are going to come on the semi-slack, the fall. And once it reaches the bottom, just shake it. Just give it a couple hops, let it rest. It'll sit straight up on the bottom. Give it a couple more, shakes of the rod tip, and just fish it kind of like a little shaky head, and work your way down that structure or around that cover wherever you're fishing. But just fish it very subtly. And another thing is, if you're fishing it and you want to fish it like a tube, you can rip it off the bottom. Instead of having just a little shakes, you can actually rip it off the bottom and let it glide back down. I don't think I mentioned that here, but because it has a really good glide to it, accentuate that, jig it up, let it glide back down to the bottom. So fish it like a tube. Fish it like a tube, man. All right. And then we've got gliding, which is essentially something that I don't do, but I've heard a lot of the Midwestern guys talk about it. And what they do is they cast it out to a kind of a steeper type structure, and they essentially just slowly reel it. Okay. They're just reeling it extremely slowly, having it pendulum back to the boat. And that from what I believe, is actually the original technique that they implemented. But I haven't used that technique. I usually use like a small swim bait or something for that kind of tactic, but I have done it once or twice and caught some fish on it. So it does work. And that's another technique. Dragging is another way. If I'm fishing a point, something with gravel, and I need a slower presentation, just a slow drag. Okay, just putting the rod tip sideways and just slowly dragging that bait, just like a Carolina rig or a football jig. It's a great bedding tactic. Again, in that situation, use a slightly heavier weight, and just pitch it in there, let it get it on the bottom, and just slowly shake it. Okay, slowly shake it. Sooner or later, they're going to eat it. Finally, think outside the box. I mean, make this your own. That's what I did. I don't do what everybody else does with this tactic. I really use it as a power fishing tactic, or I treat it as a power fishing tactic with lighter line. And that's why I love it, is because I can cast it around that cover. I can Texas rig it and get bites from fish that are heavily pressured, and be efficient with it. Don't limit yourself to just a few situations. Try it at all different lakes, different conditions, different situations. I promise you, if you're trying to catch that last keeper of the tournament, you're going to be able to catch it with the Ned Rig. What I like to do is I always like to have a Ned Rig, a plan N. Okay, so in case I don't have a limit at the end of the day, I know where I can go and catch a keeper on a Ned Rig. That's just something I keep in my back pocket whenever I can in a tournament situation. Fish it anywhere, anytime you need to keep a bite. And then from there, I mean, it's been an hour. I can't believe it. I've only got 15 things here, and it's only been an hour. So, man, I totally forgot about the giveaway. So let's go ahead. I'm going to write down a number, okay? And we're not done yet, because I'm going to be doing the Q&As, and we're going to be answering all kinds of questions here. So number between 1 and 20. Please, or not 1 and 20. Sorry. 1 and 30. That would have been bad, but yeah, between 1 and 30, whoever guesses the number. All right, hold on. It was 21. Mario, you're the first winner. Make sure that I get your information. If you follow me on Facebook or any of those, make sure that you write down your email here in the chat. Okay. So let's answer some questions. We're going to do another giveaway in just a little bit here. Different techniques for different, so Timothy asks different techniques for different times of the year. I'm going to kind of move through this real quick. The different times of the year, really, like I said, you can use this bait for different times of any point in the year. However, one of the tactics that I do, which I already mentioned here, is the spot casting, and I do that during the spring. Okay, anytime that those fish are around isolated pieces of cover, a stump, you know, a stick up, a lay down. Anytime those fish are creating a bed or staging around those isolated pieces of cover, that's when I'm using the spot casting technique. The majority of the time. Okay, I've had the big TRD. Yeah, John mentioned something about the heat in Elastec. I like to make sure that I don't keep the Elastec in the heat, because it does tend to reform itself a little bit in the sun. It's not that big of an issue, but it can happen. So we're going to keep on moving through here. Keith asks, how much do I work the Ned Rig? Again, I use very subtle movements. Okay, I let this bait be what it naturally is, and that's a subtle presentation. So even when I'm shaking it, I'm making very light shakes. I'm just essentially moving it forward just a little bit, a couple inches at a time, very, very subtle. So don't put too much, add too much action to this bait. All right. So as far as the Ned Rig goes, Ernest asks, what's my setup for fishing around grass? My setup is I use the same 6/8 medium heavy spinning reel, spinning rod from Fitzgerald Rods, same quantum spinning reel, and then I use that 20-pound braid, and I have a shorter 12 or 10 or 12-pound leader. Okay. Again, I'm fishing this around sparser cover. I'm not casting into the pad fields or anything like that, but I want a shorter leader. Okay. I want more braid, less fluorocarbon, just a little bit of fluorocarbon. And then that allows me to be able to really pull those fish out of, sparse cover. So that's kind of the setup that I use. John asks that I've started fishing it on a finesse skirted jig. Is this something you do for bigger fish or keep the panfish off? Yes, it can be. You've got the Shrooms micro finesse jig, which has the skirt material on it. It creates a jig profile. So if you're fishing around fish that are eating primarily crawfish, that's a really good option for you. But that's generally when I go to the jig, is when they're focusing on crawfish. I go to that jig that has those tassels on it to make it look like legs. Okay. Keith says that he oh shoot, did I just, no, it wasn't Keith. Somebody else that I accidentally just deleted said that they have problems setting the hook with the weedless versions, the weedless jig heads. It's something I've actually had some problems with myself. I think that the reason for that is that they actually bite it a little bit softer because of those weed guards. So that's the reason why I go to that Texas rig version, is because I can get a better hook set on it. I don't miss a lot of fish on that. And in fact, it's probably the best way to rig it outside of just the exposed hook. So if you're having that problem, if you're using the weedless version, which works extremely well, and you're losing fish, you're missing fish, you feel like they're maybe dropping it, maybe they feel that wire and they drop it, then switch over to that weedless version and the Texas rig, and you should do better. Keith asks, I primarily fish rivers. Do you recommend the Ned Rig for moving water? Absolutely, 100%. Right here on the Tennessee River, below the dam on Nick Jack, the Ned Rig is my favorite tactic to go catch those smallmouth spots and largemouth over there. It does a great job because it has a great fall in the current. You match the head to the current. If it's real heavy current, you want a heavier head on it. If it's lighter current and you want it to kind of swing past a piece of cover, it works really well. But I cast this into the seams around wing dams or any type of eddy, and it does extremely well. Ned Rig is great. Okay, we're going through the questions. Timothy asks, have I fished it around deeper bends of rivers? Absolutely. Fish them anywhere I've got a bluff bank. You'll catch fish on a Ned Rig. I have not fished the Ned Rig in Parksville. So Mario asks, how would you fish it in heavy weeds? You don't fish it in heavy weeds, actually. I don't. If I would put it on a heavier wire hook and I'd Texas rig it. But generally, there's a better tactic for that. I always fish right outside of the cover. There's one thing that needs to happen, and that's for those fish to come out of that cover to eat the Ned Rig, where I can pull them away from that cover. If they don't have enough visibility to see that bait and come out of that cover, then it's probably not the right technique. But it's not a real heavy cover situation. All right, I'm going to write down again. All right, between 1 and 30 in the comments, not the Q&A, in the chat. I'm only going off the chat. All right, and this is for just this portion. So just this number, not the, so everybody that said numbers last time, and that's excluded. So this one goes to, because we had 8. We're gonna do Brian Paper. So Brian, put your email in the chat. And you got that. You got that Ned Rig prize package, man. Okay. So what is the benefit of using super glue when you Texas rig this bait? Okay, it's actually pretty essential when you Texas rig it. I want the bait to always be snug against the head of the jig head. Okay, so I always put the glue there so it's snug against that, because if you miss a fish, this can easily slide down even with that keeper, and it just has a much more natural transition from the jig head to the bait. So I always put super glue on there. Yeah, when I'm Texas rigging this bait, my hook set does change a little bit. I'm reeling down, feeling the pressure of the fish, and then setting the hook. Okay, you want to make sure that you're constantly reeling in that situation. So you're reeling down until the full pressure, and then you pull back. With an exposed hook, you tend to have a little bit more room for error. So you can snap hook set and do better, but when it's Texas rigged, you want to make sure you're taking all the slack out of that line. All right, Ernest asks, how much weight do I use when I'm fishing a grass line like Kissimmee chain or something like that? Man, you can't be taking all my secrets away if you're fishing the open or something, but I'll give them to you anyways. I'm generally good at doing like the 1/10 ounce. You know, it has a good, nice, quick fall, but at the same time, when it hits the bottom, it's not going to dig into the muddy bottom. Nick asked, do I ever pre-starch my baits? I've never even heard of that. No, I haven't. Jeremiah asks, is there ever a time to fish it fast? Like if the fish are schooling? I'm not generally going to be fishing the bait fast, but I'm going to change the size of the head to have a faster fall. Okay, so for me, it's all about how fast that bait falls. That's kind of the key there. Do they make the TRD in easy money? I believe they do. Okay, before I finish up all these, because we've got people kind of dropping out here. All right, let me write Brian's email down real quick. Okay, before everybody leaves, I want to say we're going to still do some Q&A. I'm going to sit here until, you know, everybody's going to try to answer every question. But I want to say thank you for attending. It's really great to see so many people out here, and really hope that you enjoyed the presentation. I enjoy, you know, sharing the information that I've kind of accumulated over the last couple of years with this technique. And we're doing more webinars, so just stay tuned. Navionics has a whole database full of these webinars. I've done several of them, and I'm going to be doing one on the chatterbait, fishing the chatterbait next, and then I got another one. I forget what the presentation is for that. That's in I think April. So go check out the Navionics list. You can always find a great webinar with what they're doing. You can visit me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. If you don't follow me on those, please do. Just do me a favor, go on there, like it, follow me. I do a lot of instructional videos, so Facebook and YouTube, I put them up on there, and Instagram, I try to stay real fresh on there. So please just follow those. Visit my website, sonarfishing.com. Watch Sweetwater. Come on, it's a great show. We have a lot of great fun with my buddy Joey Nania. We go fishing all over the country, use a lot of different tactics. So watch Sweetwater, and stay tuned for more webinars from Navionics again. And big thank you to Z-Man. Got 2 prize packages coming out to 2 guys, and we're just I just absolutely love working with them. So thank you very much, Z-Man. And so let's continue with the Q&A. So for those of you that still have questions, we're going to answer them right now. But for those of you that need to go to bed, thank you very much for showing up. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you got the info you needed. All right. Timothy asked, do bright colors improve bed fishing? They're not going to improve the bite, but they're going to improve your ability to be able to see that bait. And whenever you can decipher when that fish eats that bait, that's a good thing. That's real key in bed fishing. Jeremiah asked, is the TRD good for other techniques like drop shot? Yeah, you can use it for a drop shot, but it's not going to be my favorite, because it doesn't have a whole lot of action, and it's actually so wide that it's and buoyant that it's probably going to do this. So it's going to kind of stick straight up like that on the hook. So not going to be my favorite for that, but Z-Man's got a great bait called the Trick Shots. You can use their finesse shads. They've got a lot of different baits that work really, really well. Have you? Have I used parts of the of other Z-Man products on the Shrooms jig? Not really. Haven't really messed around with that much, but you can. But that's the beautiful thing is it essentially it's not just that one bait. It's just a smaller profile bait that stands up, and so you can use any of those Elastec baits if you want. Does the TRD sit in the water column just like the Demiki rig? Any luck with suspended fish with the TRD like the Demiki? Yes, I actually have had a little bit of luck doing that. And it does sit like that in the water column when it's on a jig head like this. If it was on that drop shot hook, I think that it would sit up like that. But I think I know on the jig head, it's so rigid that it keeps it flat horizontal in the water column, so it does work good. Have I ever used a tail spinner on the Ned Rig? No, I haven't, but it actually probably worked pretty good. I have not used the Ned Rig during a mayfly hatch, but I guarantee it would work really, really well. So Merrick asks, how can save the PowerPoint presentation? This is actually going to be recorded and presented on the Navionics database and maybe on my YouTube as well. So you'll be able to get it there. But if you send me an email, sonar@sonarfishing.com, I'll send you a link to it. I have not fished the Ned Rig at night. No, because it just doesn't have enough action or enough bulk. You know, it doesn't create a lot of vibration. Robin asks, "Do I still glue with an exposed hook?" Most of the time, yeah. I'm gonna super glue this thing 100% of the time if I remember to do it. And I always super glue it. I would put the super glue right at the base of the head. Okay, I don't put it on the shank of the hook. I put it on the base of the head so it sticks to it. And don't put a lot of super glue because the super glue tends to melt the Elastec a little bit. Just a little bit will do. Man, Parker, what's up, man? I don't know when I'm coming over to the West Coast again. Not for a while. So what's my favorite color bait for smallmouth? That's a tough question. I'm just going to say green pumpkin. I mean, there's much better smallmouth colors, but I'm going to be using green pumpkin a lot, and I catch a ton of smallmouth on it. But there's one called Copper Truce that does really well. It's got a little bit of chartreuse in it, and that one works really good for smallmouth too. So. Nathan asks, what is my favorite bait to use as a trailer for the Shrooms finesse jig? That little TRD Hogs works really, really well. It has a great profile for that finesse Shrooms, the micro finesse Shrooms. What color would I use during the mayfly hatch? Probably green pumpkin. Love that color. Ed asks, do I dye the ends of the bait? I don't. Elastec doesn't hold on to dye very well, and I don't tend to dye the baits very often. BJ asks, do I use Loctite gel to glue my baits? Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's actually, I went to Walmart the other day. By the other day, it was several months ago, and one of the things I hate is super glue. Super glue, I mean, I love it, but I also hate it because it's really hard to you can only get a couple uses out of it, it seems, before it's like a complete globby solid mess. But I found one that is actually a brush. It has a brush, so you can screw off just the brush portion, or the applicator, the traditional applicator that always tends to clog up. And I haven't had any problem with the brush. I absolutely love it. So look for one. I think it is Loctite, and it has a brush applicator, and it works wonders. Works great. Mario, drag or small hop in 40-degree water? Probably a drag. Drag's good. Small hop it will work too, but dynamite, dynamite or a drag. I'm just kidding. They eat in 40-degree water too. Anne asks, I would love to use the Ned Rig in my river, but it's very muddy. What would you suggest? There are spots, white bass and walleye in there. I would absolutely say that you could find some place that you can fish the Ned Rig. The thing is that what we call the strike zone is going to narrow down big time. So it's going to become very small. And the strike zone is how far those fish are willing to move to eat that bait. And so because it's muddy, you want to make sure that you're casting closer to the isolated pieces of cover. Find the clearest water that you possibly can, like marinas and things like that. Fishing around boat docks, whether they're floating or attached to the bottom, is a great place to catch fish on the Ned Rig. And on river systems, you usually have a lot of marinas like that in backwaters. Ed, if I was to start with the Ned Rig, what two weights would I use? I'd get the 1/10 and the 1/6. I want something that sinks down to the bottom quick, and I want something that is kind of a middle of the road one. Those are the two that I like. If you're fishing, down to 20 feet water. When do I find a non-Elastec bait to be more effective? Dirk, honestly, I don't find a non-Elastec bait to be more effective on the Ned Rig. Okay, I use a lot of different soft plastics for other situations, but for the Ned Rig, really, Elastec is where it's at. It's the best, and that's the one that I really like. So. All right. Anybody else? I think we're going to start wrapping it up here. Oh, wanted to mention breaking info here. So the tournament season's just about to start. Pretty much got everything dialed in. Got a new sponsor to announce. I'm going to be working with Lucky Tackle Box this year, which is a subscription service. They send you a box every month full of different baits. The Ned Rig's actually, in there quite often. And I tell you what, I'm really excited about it. So if you guys haven't checked out one of those services, they're really great. And, I didn't realize how much I'd like to be part of a company like that. But it's really cool because I'm getting baits that normally I wouldn't use. And so it's allowing me to really get to sample different techniques that I really probably wouldn't have picked up in the store to begin with. So if you haven't checked out Lucky Tackle Box, go check them out at luckytacklebox.com. And I'm actually going to be running the Lucky Tackle Box wrapped truck and boat this year. So I'm going to show you a sneak peek. That's the design right there. You see that? So we got that coming up pretty soon. So that's a sneak peek for that. Just put this thing on the wall. All right. It looks like everybody's pretty much got their questions answered. If you haven't got your question answered, send me an email, sonar@sonarfishing.com. Thank you guys so much. Mario, I think it was Brian. Yeah, Brian. Thank you guys. I'm glad you won. Z-Man's going to send you some prize packages. So thank you guys again. Been great. Keep up with me on all my social media and watch the next webinar. Thanks a lot. Take care.